My personal philosophy is that we are nothing without bodies. That's part of the human condition. Whatever shape our bodies take, whatever ability, disability they have, like that is the body we're in. And it impacts all of our perception, how we move through the world, don't move through the world, things we can do, can't do. Like all of it is filtered through the body. And even though our characters are little beans on the page, and even though we have the power as writers to not give them corporeal forms, like writing in spec-fic genres, even that, like if our character is a spaceship or if it's a hologram, that will impact what we can and cannot do with it. And if you're writing that character well, they will recognize those limitations and it will impact their desires or lacks thereof. It will impact how other characters interact with it.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 144 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me this week is my co-host, my bestie from the Midwestie, the queen of my days, Greta Kelly. How are you, Greta?
Good. I'm excited to talk about some training shit. It's going to be great.
Yeah. No, you said you've been working out recently, so bring it.
Yes, MJ's been a bad influence on me, so I've been working the muscles.
Hopefully MJ's been a bad influence on all of you because health is important. Yeah. And if you want some books to read while you're working out, maybe an audio book, maybe on Kindle if you're on the elliptical or something, you can go check out The Queen of Days by Greta Kelly, which is her latest novel and is out now in paperback. If you want a fun heist with some redonkulous characters who have more swagger than, what was it? More swagger than?
More swagger than sense.
More swagger than sense. There we go.
And of course, go check out Mushroom Blues if you love some gritty science fiction with a little bit of mystery baked in there. It is now an award-winning, beautiful book about murder, mystery, mayhem, mushrooms. Go do it.
It was really ugly before.
That's true.
Now it's beautiful. Now it's purred. All right. And if you want to support MJ and her journey of getting buff and quitting her day job, then go pick up Among Thieves and its sequel, Thick Ass Thieves, to give that girl a little support and enjoy a fun heist duology in the meantime. As well, for listeners out there, you can support SFF Addicts on Patreon for a ton of cool extras like bonus episodes, author readings, and more. So go check the links in the description to help us do what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now joining us once again is the buff as fuck CL Clark without sleeves. If you're watching the video, what's up?
Yeah. Video, this should be an incentive to actually
watch the video.
Check it out.
Watch the video.
Here in full glory, with the tiny flame and the big flame.
Dominant hands, man, dominant hands. But CL is the author of The Unbroken, The Faithless, and the newly released arcane tie-in Ambessa, Chosen of the Wolf. It's wonderful to have you back.
Good to be back. Good to be back. And I just have to say that it's not just, though it is partially hand dominance, but I had surgery on my right shoulder, and it has never quite regained full mobility and also size.
It's kind of like I can't remember. It's like like Popeye. It's got I think Popeye was a little bit balanced. I can't remember. Yeah.
No, he definitely had like the one forearm.
Yeah. It's like, what are you doing, dude, in your spare time? You nasty sailor. A heads up, this is part 2 of our 2-part chat with Cherae, so I recommend checking out part 1 to get to know her better. Today, though, we already teased it. We're getting jacked as fuck as we chat about how to train your character. Before we dig deeper into the episode, a quick word from our sponsor. Welcome to Transference, where death and sickness are but a distant memory. Nicholas Five Boroughs is a sicko, someone that takes on others' illnesses. In a city where diseases can be transferred, the rich buy longer lives without pain, and the poor get a short life of constant sickness. Brought back from the brink of death by his friend Brian Meadowhearth, or maybe the invisible hand of an outside actor, Nick finally gets the chance to try and change things, to finally stop the whole disease transfer network. Tensions escalate as Nick infiltrates a higher society he doesn't understand, and starts to fall for Dorothy Sungate, the very person he needs to manipulate to be successful. And between run-ins with a talking cat, genetically modified humans, and a robotic police force, the world around him just keeps getting stranger. Can Nicholas tear down the disease transfer architecture? And how much of his humanity is he willing to bargain along the way? A dystopian vision of healthcare and a market economy, Transference will appeal to fans of Red Rising, Blade Runner, and the BioShock franchise. Soon to be a complete duology with the release of Transcendence in the summer of 2025. Transference by Ian Patterson is available now in paperback and ebook. Get your copy today. And now, enjoy the rest of this episode of SFF Addicts. So just to kick things off, I want to talk about your personal relationship with training, bodybuilding, and all of that, and why is it such an important aspect of your life?
So I've always been somewhat into sports. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional soccer player. That was one of the long list of careers that I had for myself, alongside carpenter, actor, um, construction worker, which kind of goes with carpenter, um, and probably other stuff as well. But those are the big ones. Um, then I never made it as a professional soccer player, not for lack of trying. But then I also discovered rugby, which I loved, and like I really loved like actually getting to hit people. Like in soccer, you're not supposed to hit people, um, but in rugby, it
But they
was
still do, and
absolute.
then so many people fake it. But rugby's like real deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I played soccer, I was my claim to fame. I was a really good slide tackler, and I would do it at any opportunity. But I didn't foul. Like that's partly why I was so good. Is I always
Oh,
hit the ball
Right.
first. Yeah. But I was always on the lookout for the opportunity.
I just have
And
like a
then-
really absurd visual in my head of like you just like sliding around the field, like not doing any running, but just sliding.
Yeah, so then in rugby I actually got to hit people on purpose, though my job on the field actually was to not get hit. I was a wing, which is essentially a little speedster on the side who gets the ball and then shoots to the try zone. And yeah, so obviously I didn't want to get hit. But um, I started strength training to get better at sports. I was always reading my dad's like his men's fitness magazines, and I also read the women's fitness magazines. But fairly early on, I realized that this is not actually for me. Um, I also learned a lot about just general like fitness marketing for women, but that's a different story, I think. Or maybe it's not a different story. We might touch on it later as we keep going. um, but it wasn't for me, suffice it to say. And the more I got into fitness, the more I realized that it's also actually very closely linked with my gender identity, my gender presentation. And when I started, when I was in undergrad, I went to undergrad initially for exercise science and and like journalism, but that's a different story. And I eventually realized I didn't actually, after getting through a fair amount of my coursework, I realized I didn't need the actual degree to do what I really wanted, which was personal training. So despite having taken a lot of classes in the program, I bailed on it and got my certification and started working. Which, I mean, I don't have a lot of regrets about that, but I do sometimes think about going back to finish that degree or that side of my degree because I ended up changing my major and doing English and French instead. But I do think longingly about some of the classes I could have taken if I had gone higher up. But I still do a lot of research in the industry because the passion has never stopped. Even though I no longer work as a personal trainer, I'm still super into the latest science, the latest pseudoscience. Like, I really like to know what people are thinking, what people are telling themselves, and now kind of the weird proliferation of it online, like on Instagram with influencers. Please, if you guys are listening to this, like, for the love of God, do not listen to everything an Instagram fit person tells you. Just don't.
It is like a weird space of like influencers, the whole like
Yeah,
Insta
it's
fitness
bizarre.
thing.
It's bizarre.
It's so bizarre. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
like from my Instagram, it's like there's there's like nutrition,
Mhm.
there's like some biohackers, which is like a whole other thing.
Yeah, but they're all kind of
Then there's
slightly
like
connected.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's just like this tangential sort of line that threads through all of it, but
Mhm.
some of it is like way too fucking extreme. Some of it
Mhm.
just like
You're never
like
more than like 2 clicks away from like a weird diet or some video of somebody eating like animal testicles. I swear you're not.
Are you low in testosterone, Cherae? Eat some
Actually,
balls.
but yeah, so I've definitely been told to eat balls, not as an insult, but as a health panacea. um, yeah. Anyway, so like, if you want to eat Rocky Mountain oysters, like, I'm not gonna stop you. I'm just saying, don't do it because an Instagram kid told you to. That's all I'm saying.
It's a rule to live by.
Yeah.
Be wary.
But yeah, like, and also obviously, like, I'm a fantasy writer, so a lot of the characters I was reading about were warriors and tough and rah rah rah. And I think in part one I mentioned that Wheel of Time was one of my early influences, early loves in the fantasy world. And so they have the Aiel, which are known for being able to run really long distances through the desert. And at the time, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a runner. And I'm like, 12 years old. I hated running. So I would just run laps around my basement. Like, there's a stairwell. And so I would just run laps in this tiny little basement. And I would like hate my life after doing it for 4 minutes. But now I'm like, I actually do distance running, and I love it a lot. And so now I'm just like, oh, huh. Now I'm an
Full
IU.
circle.
Finally.
Yeah, I
Happened.
made it. Just not in a desert, like in a.
Well, I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, ultra marathon could be the next step.
There
Oh,
you go.
damn, that'd be cool.
Probably not.
What role?
Probably not.
Probably not. What role can the body, with all of its strengths and weaknesses, play in the stories that we tell ourselves and others?
See, I knew Women's Fitness would come into this. I knew it would. Women's Fitness magazine. It's all about the stories that women are allowed to tell themselves about what shapes their bodies can be, regardless of what, like, actually they're capable of growing into becoming. So I think, oh man, the thing that I do believe is that we can move our bodies however we want to. Like, there's no necessity. Like, we all need to look like this, and I think that's one of the things that, speaking of fitness influencers and stuff, that gets touted a lot. That you have to be waking up at 4:30, and you have to be running every day, and you have to be a hybrid athlete. So after you do your running, you have to also be deadlifting 500 pounds, and like all of that kind of thing. And like, it's this the myth of discipline is a like it's this really big one, that fitness means you are disciplined, or looking a certain way means you are disciplined, and stuff like that. And I think that's a huge story that people tell themselves, because it makes us feel good about ourselves, to feel like we have these positive attributes. But the myth, I do think the myth goes both ways. Like, we tell ourselves that we are superior because we do X, Y, or Z, but we can just as easily get sucked into the reverse. Like, because I can't do X, Y, and Z, I'm weak, or this isn't for me, or whatever, just because you don't want to meet a certain, like, weirdly vaunted standard. Um, and I think there still is a point in like finding what your body likes to do and doing it. And there are true things like moving your body however you can in a kind of regular way is often going to be beneficial for longevity. Obviously, like individual ability and stuff all comes into play here. But um, yeah, I think both of those two poles are really just these weird stories that we tell ourselves to cover up insecurities. Like one is I'm so big and cool and superior that I don't have insecurities or vulnerabilities, and then the other is I'm so insecure about failing to do this big thing that I will make it so that I can't even do this small thing that actually is in my wheelhouse. And so I think that there are a lot of ways that we might be dishonest with ourselves about like fitness or activities, and to cover up that very human side of us. So
Yeah, I agree. And never discount the power of walking.
I know
Like,
walking is so good, and it
actually,
doesn't even have to be
yeah,
10,000 steps.
yeah.
Right.
That's the thing. There's like always these like doctrines. I feel like fitness is such a like
Very
it's such a
dogmatic.
yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
macrocosm of microcosms where it's like all these different dogmas just like compound 10,000 steps and like lift this amount and blah blah blah. But yeah, like Cherae said, like find the avenue that works for you, and it's like baby steps are still steps, and it feels very analogous to writing in that sense where it's like every small thing you do accumulates into a
Mhm, mhm,
grander result,
mhm.
which is really cool. I wanted to get your take on some examples that you love from books, movies, TV, whatever, of like realistic or convincing. I think we're gonna use the word progression a lot here because I think
Okay.
training is a progression, and I think it fits well into the realm of stories that a
Mhm.
character is progressing or regressing in certain ways. So, are there some examples that you love from media? Like, everyone obviously knows like the Rocky montage, but I
Mhm,
think there are
mhm,
like
mhm.
lots of really cool examples of fitness and strength and that kind of progression.
Okay, so this isn't exactly a progression, but it's still one of my favorite. Well, actually, kind of, it's maybe it's a regression if we think about it that way. But one of my favorite scenes of physicality, period, that I've watched is there's the hallway fight scene in Daredevil, the Marvel TV show Daredevil, and I think if it's still up, they actually have just excerpted it on YouTube, so you can go watch it. And basically, Daredevil just is fighting through a hallway. He's already a little bit busted, and he just gets more busted as the scene goes on. It's not only is it the example that I usually think of when I'm doing like writing a fight scene or advising people on fight scenes, but I think it's just a really good reckoning of what happens to a body under stress, especially while it's getting like the shit beat out of it. Um, yes, no matter how skilled you are, if you get hit a lot and sometimes with like chair legs or other weapons, um, your body's going to it's going to feel the impact of that no matter how well trained you are, even if you're a so-called superhero. um, you're going to slow down, you're gonna be a little dizzy, you're gonna miss punches. The more injured you are and the slower your reaction speed is, the more you're going to get hit, which is just going to compound all of that. So I really love that, and I do think that could be considered a kind of regression scene. And you could just blow that up as a macrocosm for in a story if you wanted to, like someone who just goes under blow after blow and how that changes um, their body or their story. But the other thing that I was thinking of is I read not recently, but within the last couple years, David Dalglish's The Bladed Faith. and fun book, but most importantly, most importantly, it's this assassin kid. This kid is trained kind of like an assassin, as like a vengeance assassin kind of character. And I mean, maybe I have a soft spot for him because basically his workout routine is my workout routine, which is have or imagine, like in my head, I'm, imagine like a hot lesbian yelling at me, telling me to do stuff. um, and so he's got this lesbian axe fighter yelling at him, making him run laps and carry like sandbags or big rocks and stuff. And I'm like, yeah.
That would be awful.
Go check out Cherae's Instagram to find out more.
Yeah, I don't train anymore because for various reasons, but in my heart, I could be the lesbian yelling at you guys. But yeah, so I liked, and also the thing I also liked about it is that the montage takes like years. The kid, it's not like I did this for like a month and now I'm a super assassin.
Yeah,
we see this over
which is like the Rocky montage. It's like just like go to a like a butcher shop and punch some meat for a couple weeks
because that's something that you would be allowed to do.
Yeah. Of course,
health and safety.
It's so sanitary, man. Come on, wash your fucking hands before you punch some meat. Oh my god. But I love that. Yeah, it's like so much of there's so many like misconceptions, I think, which is hopefully what this masterclass will do. It's like it takes years versus like, it's kind of like another one of those big things in the fitness industry and the health industry, which is like change your body overnight or overnight in quotes,
days.
but like a short
30 days. Yeah, it's like 30 days.
It's like, do you want to take Ozempic or do you want to actually train your body in a healthy way and gain muscle and lose fat kind of thing? So there's like the quick fixes, but then there's the long-term sort of dedication. But when it comes to storytelling and character arcs, what do you think is the role of like the body in how that character can be portrayed and how strength can kind of become like a fundamental pillar for that character's abilities and what readers expect of them?
Well, I mean, first off, I think like my personal philosophy is that we are nothing without bodies. That's part of the human condition. Whatever shape our bodies take, whatever ability, disability they have, like that is the body we're in. And it impacts all of our perception, how we move through the world, don't move through the world, things we can do, can't do. Like all of it is filtered through the body. And even though our characters are little beans on the page, and even though we have the power as writers to not give them corporeal forms, like writing in spec fic genres, even that, like if our character is a spaceship or if it's a hologram, that will impact what we can and cannot do with it. And if you're writing that character well, they will recognize those limitations and it will impact their desires or lacks thereof. It will impact how other characters interact with it. Like I think About Ancillary Justice is a great series for exploring how that works, as well as Aliette Dubaudard's Zuya series with the like spaceship hologram, like the spaceships that have a kind of core self.
What's
thing.
The name of that series? Also Martha Wells' Murderbot does a good job of this.
Yeah, so the body is going to impact the story, absolutely. What was the second part of that question?
In terms of how strength can become like a pillar for both the character and their abilities, but also the reader and their expectations.
And so once we've decided that the character has a body and strength, like physical strength, for example, but not limited to, I think any kind of strength that you give a character, it also shows you what weaknesses you're going to exploit. And yeah, I think whatever strength you set them, that's where you will be testing them as a character. So if you set them to have physical strength, many of your tests are going to be against that physical strength. And some of them will be easy. Like, okay, yeah, you've got muscles, punch this guy. And they'll be like, all right, I got this, punch this guy. And then you get to play with it. So one way you can do that is, okay, well, now we're going to give you a guy who is bigger than you, who can punch harder than you. Now, how will you handle that? You also have the opportunity to have the character break in some way. So, I mean, a big thing that I think a lot of able-bodied athletes we haven't reckoned with, or maybe we're afraid to reckon with, is aging, injury, like long-term injury or severe injury. Basically, essentially becoming disabled. And so having a character who hasn't interrogated their relationship with disability have to do that. Also, just, I mean, like, think about, this isn't something that we actually see as often, but I would love to see, like, somebody coming back for one last job after they've been retired for a decade. Like, bodies change when you stop doing the thing that you've been doing. Like, this guy could be out of shape, this guy could have arthritis. Like, what do we do to get back into that kind of thing? So there are so many different ways. It just depends on what kind of growth you want your character to have. Like, if it's a success story, maybe it's how a character augments their strength. Like, a Rocky type story is, like, the goal is still for him to win physically, right? To surmount a physical challenge. But maybe the goal is for the character to rely less on their body in some kind of way, or to develop a greater sense of empathy. I will be completely honest, I am really not into the dumb jock himbo kind of stereotype, because I think it closes off. First off, it's just very overplayed, but it also just closes off our own imaginations for what real people can be like. Like, we assume that people who have muscles are dumb. And I mean, sure, yeah, some people with muscles are dumb, but so are some people without muscles, right?
Yeah, and there are a lot of really, really intelligent people who are also really into fitness.
Yeah, but also, also they can like this is, I mean, maybe this is just where my head goes, but also, like, people with muscles who are depicted as dumb, like, they're deemed too stupid to be villains. And I think that there is a lot of really villainous stuff that happens in, like, the bodyscape as well. Like the quest for immortality. What would you do to have the ultimate youth? Like, would you suck your son's blood out for, like, several decades? And just kind of like the diabolical things that you might get up to maintain this whatever strength that you've got. So like, all sorts of weird opportunities pop up when you don't limit yourself to the stereotype of the body type or strength type.
And that fits so well into science fiction and fantasy, where you can just, like, maybe someone's like starting, like, augment themselves and kind of getting into conversations of transhumanism and posthumanism and stuff like that. Or on the fantasy side of things, it's like vampires are a really interesting way to talk about bodies and
longevity,
immortality,
like,
and those kinds
general,
of things.
Like, augmenting strength. Cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And a quick aside, Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames does a good job of the warriors who come out of retirement to get back into the fold and realize, we're fat and out of shape and, like, old.
Actually, I have those books, and Rose, I think, like Rose,
Bloody Rose,
Bloody Rose. Yeah, I have both of those, but I haven't read them yet. So I will put that on the this year list, because that's my jam.
Well, before we get more in depth onto our, like, training regimen, how do you think authors can approach strength and training when it comes to differences between female characters and male characters, and should there be any differences to that training regimen or not?
I mean, honestly, it depends on what you want them to do. But otherwise, I would say no, because the general physiognomy of humans is the same. Um, and on the micro scale, they vary so widely, even between the sexes, including like bonus sexes that are within like the human possibility, that there's not really any point in trying to make a specific thing for each. Like, just everybody go out, pick up heavy shit until it becomes light. When it becomes light, pick up heavier shit. And with running or like the cardiovascular component, you can either walk or run slowly for a really long time until you can't anymore, and then stop, and then gradually do it again over time, a little farther, whatever, or do a lot of stuff really fast with a lot more breaks, and you'll build stamina that way. And I think it really is, it's more like, for me, I would say it's more task specific. So if you're going to have soldiers on the front line who need to swing a sword for a long time, um, you should probably have them run. Like, the sword swinging is good, but they're going to be there for a long time. I mean, depending on what kind of
Yep.
battle you're going to have, what kind of battle you're interested in.
Yeah, or
But
what era it is as well.
exactly. Because if you and also like if you have a cavalryman, like the job is very different until your horse dies, in which case then you're just like the rest of us.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
also need cardio and maybe run in that armor once in a while.
But yeah, between sexes, it's not really an issue as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
like
I think there's like a like from a marketing standpoint, I think like you were saying earlier about when you were growing up, the men's fitness magazines versus the women's fitness magazines, and sort of like not necessarily the stories we tell ourselves, but the stories that are marketed to us that we then tell ourselves.
Absolutely.
Those end up defining a lot. And so in the realm of fantasy and science fiction and media in general, there can be better, more nuanced representations of all sexes and all body types and all fitness levels. And that's why I love your book so much, is because it's like you have characters who feel like, yeah, this isn't just like a very stereotypical, here's a female woman in a fantasy world. And what has fantasy taught us for so long is that like women need protection, women are damsels in distress, and so on and so on. But to be able to show like, here are women who are capable physically, mentally, emotionally, like that is really cool to see. So it's like there is so much nuance in this whole story. And like you said, like it comes down to the individual level, like maybe deciding what is an individual character capable of, as opposed to what are go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that speaking of that, but from a slightly different lens, like one of the things that I really loved that happened recently in media, it was video game. It was part of the God of War franchise. They went Norse, and they brought in Thor, but he wasn't like the like Chris Hemsworth type of Thor with like rippling pecs and like a 20 pack or whatever. He was like built like a strong man. Like, this man had a belly. He was huge, and he was built like not skinny, not cut. Like, he looked like a strong man. And frankly, if I need somebody to be hitting stuff for me, I would rather have a man who looks like a strong man than a man who looks like Chris Hemsworth, because that guy is going to hit hard, and he's probably going to be able to hit a lot for a like. I mean, like, I would be scared. Chris Hemsworth, like I'm sure that
Like
the strength is there, but
yeah, it's like you're pretty, man, but this guy can like take a barrage.
He's gonna, and he's going.
Yeah, there's truth to that, because there was recently, I watched a documentary recently on gladiators, and they're like, they don't look like Marvel action figures.
Mhm.
They're a
Yeah.
little bit bigger because when you get stabbed, it's nice to not have that hidden organ. Like you
Yeah.
want a little padding.
Yeah, but they're also just like they're not thinking about like, do I look like a model?
Right.
Mhm.
They're like, do I feel strong and am I capable of acting upon that strength? Not
Mhm.
necessarily like, a gladiator in Rome is thinking like, how good do my fucking six pack look? And it's like nobody. That's just not
You
like.
mean
I
you
think it's
didn't
like
see
a
that chiseled on the stone? Like, looking
What?
really
Yeah.
good today.
Died in 32 BC with six packs. It's like I think it's like it's just the time that we're in that societal standards and the value upon which people put like physical appearance and like attractiveness on a pedestal,
Mhm.
and that is so different from actual strength and being able to act upon that. And so
We're
I think we're going
joking
to do a little
about.
bit of
Oh, sorry. I just want to add.
go
We
for
were
it, go for it.
joking about it being chiseled on like a Roman tablet or something, but there actually, I think he was Greek, but there was a philosopher who, or maybe he was a politician. I'd have to go back and look, but he actually said, "Do not give me Olympians for soldiers," and I was like, "Ooh, called out." But he was specifically talking about he didn't want the little like oiled up Olympian wrestlers. He wanted soldiers. Somebody can go look that up and find that. But yeah, it was like, damn, ouch, nice.
That's like a Greek version of a meme.
Yeah.
It's on my tombstone,
Yeah.
motherfucker. It's there forever.
I'm
Oh my
sorry, I
god. All
interrupted
right, well
you.
let's do it's all good. Let's do a little bit of a walkthrough of sort of potential stages of a character's training, progression, regression, and the impacts that can have on a story. So, I kind of lined it out like one would be sort of like the level of skill and strength portrayed at the beginning of a story. So, how could writers decide like what a POV character's starting point is and how that will affect the rest of the story? And then kind of like how other characters are contrasted around
Hmm.
them.
Hmm. So this first depends on the world a bit. And so anytime I'm sort of building a character from the beginning, I'm usually building the world at the same time, unless the character is the idea that came first. But very quickly after, I'm looking for what kind of world is going to make this character I have envisioned really interesting. And so, let's say I envisioned a really, really strong, buff woman. Fine, never done that before. Uh, can I just pause real quick and just show folks the covers? I'm getting typecast in my covers. Is just women with buff arms on the covers, and it's the best
Yeah.
thing I think. And like, this is what I want to be known for on my tombstone. Cherae was really buff, but most importantly, she had buff covers on her books. That's it.
No Olympians.
um, but yeah, so the character's starting point depends first on the world that they're in, and then what I'm interested in exploring. So if I'm interested in exploring the growth of that kind of strength, like if we're starting from like a kid who doesn't have the strength yet, or a woman who doesn't know her strength, um, or is just starting out, um, interested in the possibility of her strength but has never been given the chance to explore it, that's going to probably be a growth story. Like, it's the journey, at least, will be how can she build this strength and what challenges will she find on the way. um, Conversely, if we start out with someone who is already strong, it is going to either be a story of can we hold on to that strength among challenges, or it is going to be a fallen arc kind of story. Like, what will she do as she is losing that strength? So, whether we start at the top and go to the bottom, or start at the bottom and go to the top, that's kind of the natural progression. And I'm always open to, um, twisting these out or twisting the tropes a bit and trying things out. But that's the initial thing, and then the characters, like the side characters or other main characters who might be involved, they're just like whatever is most challenging, even if they're allies. Like, how is that going to be um, a challenge or a different perspective for the main character? Like when I was working on The Unbroken, one of the things I really liked the most is having Terrain, who is able-bodied, very strong in these physical prowess kind of ways, and then having Luca, who has a messed up leg and chronic pain, uses a cane, and while she has certain physical prowesses, like how the two think about each other's bodies, like Terrain's fears about her own body, and like the fact that she could end up losing her capability, like Luca, and then Luca's jealousy sometimes at how easily Terrain can do certain things. Like having those kinds of interactions, whether they say them out loud to each other or not, even sometimes it's just having that hidden resentment can make for a really interesting tension between characters. Um, so having side characters that can augment tension in that way with interesting perspectives, that's I would say that's chiefest. And also like offering different shades. Like if you have a character who's like moderately strong and then someone who's just enough stronger that they're like,
Mm-hmm.
damn, like, I kind of hate you a little bit.
I'm coming for you.
Exactly. So that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, I'm working on a novel right now where there's two rivals, and that's really fun. Like sometimes one is stronger, sometimes the other is stronger, but mostly they just want to like beat each other up all the time, and it's great.
Yeah, competition can be a good thing, right? Driving
Yeah.
force.
Oh yeah.
Well, you kind of mentioned like defeat earlier on and how you handle losing. How do you think defeat, especially early in the story, will help set stakes for the character's later progression as the story moves forward?
I mean, I think first off, defeat just kind of, I think it's always good to have a little defeat as soon as possible because, for one, it makes us think, oh, this character is not plot safe. Like they're not overprotected. I feel like we might actually get into some danger. Awesome. Um, but I think it helps, for one, it helps to show what kind of arc we're going to go for. Like, are we failing while trying to go up? Is this going to be the beginning of a downward spiral? Like, maybe we start with a buff character who wants to get stronger. They're like greedy for more power, just for example. Does that failure set the downward spiral? Like, did they reach too far and ambition is now their downfall? Like that kind of narrative. Is it a character who is trying to get stronger and has an early defeat, and maybe they're like, oh, this sucks, actually I'm not interested in this anymore? How does the story change then? Is it, do they get another opportunity, or are they now forced on a different path looking for a different kind of strength? Or do they decide to look away? I mean, this is your very kind of typical ignoring the call, then accepting the call. Like, do they ignore the call, say, I don't want to be that kind of strong, and then lose something because of it? And now they're like, oh no, now I'm in the situation where I have to, or my life is in danger, or the life of my loved ones are in danger, or something like that. Um, or maybe they're just like, oh, that sucked. All right, let's go. We're going back in. Like all of that kind of stuff, it shows off a different kind of character. It shows off a different kind of story. And so I think it again, it depends on what kind of story you want to tell, but it really, like the first defeat is when the story starts, as far as I'm concerned.
It's so
Yeah.
important
Kind of like an
too.
inciting incident.
Yeah, because there's always an urge for early writers to like make their character like super strong and awesome at everything because they don't want to seem like weak. But I don't know. I think how you face defeat and what you do next says so much about who the
So
character
much
is.
more.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then from that early defeat, it's like there's, depending on which arc you're going for, there's opportunity for that progression or regression. And like, there are so many different ways of sort of conveying methods of training and that kind of thing. It's like you got like Karate Kid, you go for like that kind of like Mr. Miyagi type training. But like I love what you mentioned earlier about David Dalglish's a book about the assassin boy who has the lesbian mentor sort of like berating him and making him carry rocks and sandbags and shit. How can a story sort of like naturally find like what's the ideal method of training for this character? Maybe like how long it will take, and in a way that's like contextually understandable and makes sense. So how can authors think about that kind of thing?
Well, it takes a long time to get really good at something. Like, period. It just takes a long time. If you look at natural bodybuilders, which is to say, they're not taking like steroids of any kind, testosterone supplements, whatever. Which, I mean, I don't. That's not an issue, but just in terms of like the natural growth of muscle, or the natural growth of strength, it takes a lot longer under natural circumstances if you are trying to get to like X peak condition. And so if that's what you want your character to be, it's going to take a long time. Obviously, it depends on where they're starting from. But also there's just the idea of like a natural kind of asymptotic plateau. Like eventually the gains get slower and slower and slower. You get closer to the maximum that you can achieve as it is without magic.
Or technology.
Or technology. Yeah. So there's that first off, but then we get into, and I mean, there are also trade-offs like the idea of getting really strong and building more muscle. You can do that like moderately quickly, but moderately is key here. But like you might not want to if the goal is to stay cut, for example, because to gain muscle, you have to eat an excess of calories, which often leads to fat gain, which is neutral. And so if like as a character, they might be like, yeah, let me look like Thor. Let's go. And as far as I'm concerned, that's just a much more interesting character. I'm not really interested in my characters having to have six packs. It's not a narrative perk. I think it's odd. Kind of.
Unless you're writing romance.
Yes, fair, yeah. Fair. But again, I mean, a little cushion, like, hey.
Yeah. Well, you're training in other ways in that kind of story.
But yeah, so so there's that, but then there's also like physical skills and martial skills, and that is an even more different ballgame. And I mean, to be fair, most of us are doing this. Like, we want our characters to be a little bit special, and so we want them to be kind of good at something. We want them to be the assassin or the great warrior, the duelist knight, or something like that. But it takes really long time to be good at that kind of skill in a way that will keep you alive. And because these are skills that are life and death skills, usually, at least in the case that we're using them in our books, as someone who's been doing HEMA, historical European martial arts, I am here to tell you that if you are just so-so, you're going to get hit a lot. You're going to get hit a lot. And if you are getting hit a lot in a life or death situation, you're going to be dead. So you have to be good enough to at least like be like real solid on your defense, or you need to have a lot of armor, like a fucking lot of armor, which then again makes it harder to move. So, we have all of these physical trade-offs. So if you have a sword master, I mean, they need to have been doing this for a long time. And if they're going to be a sword master, it's not just a long time, but like, actually, I can shorten it because I did it every day for 8 hours a day. No. you need that 8 hours a day, and you need like 50 years. If that's your characters going around calling themselves a sword master, that's what you need. However, because you can be okay and get hit a lot, that also means you can be okay and hit other people a lot. So you could get lucky and kill more people than, than kill you, because all it takes is one.
Just a few bumps and scratches until it's
so
the
you
end.
you can get some cuts and stuff. You can even get stabbed and still make it out. But we'll get to that later. It's just that you have to grade, like scale back and forth to like what you're actually going to give your character time to do. If you're going to take a farm boy and give them like 8 hours a day of training for like only a month, you're going to have someone who knows they know where the pointy end is. They will probably be okay, which still gives them like a 50-50 chance of dying. Do that for them for like a year, too. I mean, then things get a little bit more variable. They're not going to be able to call themselves a sword master, I think. But, depends on the teacher, depends on the character's dedication. But I would certainly think if I'm going to read a book and you want your kid to go from farm boy to competent blade user, I would definitely say like a couple years is the minimum. But the big caveat I have to put here is like I know some HEMA folks who are really, really good, and none of them go through all bouts completely unscathed. So there's that. But also, just like some people are just prodigies, and by all means, like let your character be a prodigy. Just take whatever the caveats that come with that kind of character building. And then also, like, there could be a HEMA teacher out there who's going to call me out and say, actually, you're wrong. And if you come train with me, I will make you a sword master in 6 months. And I mean, I would take you up on the offer. Give me free 6 months of classes, and then I'll prove you wrong, or I'll prove you right. Like, let's go.
But there are enough charlatans in the fitness industry.
Yeah.
Don't come in here with your 6 months and you're a master.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly there's like a Chekhov's gun element to all of this too, of like, if you're putting them through this training, there's got to be a payoff later for it. Like it's got to be for a reason. But you mentioned getting stabbed earlier. So let's talk about that.
Stab.
What can injuries and like the consequences that result from that add to a story and add to an individual character's like emotional and physiological, psychological journey? How do you view injuries in storytelling?
I love them. As someone who has injuries, like I mentioned my shoulder, it's changed the way I live in a lot of ways. It's changed the things I can do, how long I can do them. I learn a lot about, I think a lot about warriors who have been doing something for a long time, because just for example, not like anybody should come use this against me in a tournament, but because of my shoulder, I can't raise my arm in sword forms up this, like in theory, I should be able to raise it like this high. I can't do that with my right arm. So my guard is always a little bit low, which means if someone attacks me from this side and I either try to like guard from a high position instead of moving the fuck out of the way, sorry, language.
It's okay.
All good.
But if I do that, I'm probably going to die because I don't have the strength to hold someone off, which means I have to adjust my fighting style, which means I'm going to probably not defend with the blade from this point. I'm probably going to do more voids, use like more agility style, getting out of the way instead of like physical defense. And so thinking about how a character is going to adjust, that's just fun. It's not always like a big narrative plot point, but it could be. But narratively, then we just kind of go back to how, if you're starting with a character who is like completely, like fully able-bodied, then goes to war and comes back with a life-changing injury. I mean, how they learn to live with that is an entire arc all on its own. How does that change their self-worth, their view of themselves? How do other people see them if they were lauded in the community because of their physical capabilities? Like, if it's a martial community and they can no longer fight, where are they now in the pecking order? If they're like, so it's like so many of these kings who had to fight their way to the throne, like in some sort of like homeganger or something, like a battle in the ring. Like, if you can't win the battle in the ring, who's in charge? Like, can you hold the throne anymore if that's the kind of world you're building? How are your intimate relationships? Like, if you were the most beautiful or most handsome warrior and you come back home with like missing an eye and like a chunk of your nose or something, like, are you still beloved? Like, what kinds of things are you going through? And then how you deal with that as a character moving forward? Like, does it send you downward into a spiral, or do you grow because of it? Like, all of that kind of stuff is up for grabs.
Yeah, and then something like with a character like Luca in the Magic and the Lost series,
Hmm.
a character who's disabled and has a chronic injury, and so that leads to a lot of people underestimating her,
Hmm.
misreading her and her capabilities.
Hmm.
So it's also like, what kinds of, when you do sustain injuries, and whether or
Hmm.
not they're quick to heal or they're chronic, how does that change how people perceive you? But then also,
Hmm.
what kinds of strengths surface from that?
Exactly,
What
exactly.
other people might perceive as a weakness, I think, is
Hmm.
really interesting as well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And like,
and this
speaking of Daredevil, we have that like
yeah, yeah,
his
yeah,
whole superpower
like,
is
right.
that, yeah.
And it's so like iconic to see like a superhero's mask get smashed, kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
And like identity in that sense is also, like hiding their identity is kind of part of their performance. And so when the
Hmm.
identity is revealed, when the mask comes off, it's like that is also a
Hmm.
weakness.
Hmm.
That's also like a different kind of injury.
Hmm.
So there are different ways you can explore it. I think like psychologically and physically is
Yeah,
so
definitely.
cool. And all of this leads to, I think, the boss battle kind of thing, which is like, there is an antagonist, and there is sort of like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. Like, there can be antagonistic forces that are not people. But getting to that point, that sort of climax, that the inciting incident of an early defeat could set up to lead you towards this, and how important is like the boss battle and sort of completing this arc for a protagonist.
I think like, you like, for me, payoff is king in this. And so wherever we start, um it should be opposite in some way. Like, if we start high and the challenge is, have they fallen and like whatever, then the final boss is like, are you going to stay down? Like, is this your death knell, or are you going to drag yourself out of this again and maybe make the next book is the climb back up or something like that? um
Sequel.
or is it like, is this your final challenge coming from the bottom to the top? Like, you now have to see, has all your training paid off? If it's more of a like, can I stay here? Can I hold it? Like, is this like, if you are the king at the top, and you've been trying to hold this throne, let's say you have sustained some sort of like war born, or even like just age or illness born disability, and your job is to hold your throne. um, Maybe the final boss is the new up and like young up and comer finally with an army. Maybe the question is, yeah, I'm gonna rock your shit because I still got it, like, let's go. Or maybe it's I don't want this anymore. It's not worth it. It's not worth my time. I have other things to do. I'm retired. This sucks. I don't want to be king. Like there's so many options for that final decision. But I think it has to be earned. Like, and this is where it goes beyond the scope of just like writing a character who's well trained. It's all about how has the story been paced up to this point. Have you had enough challenges, enough attempts and failures, enough attempts and successes to make the readers feel like this final battle actually has some stakes? Like, have we made it all seem too easy? Have we beat all attempts up to this point? And if so, there like it won't feel good if all of a sudden out of nowhere the big boss wins, because we're like, well, he was so strong and we haven't even seen anybody as strong as the big boss, and now the smashing of the character just feels like Deus Ex Machina, but for villains, and that's no
Mhm.
fun. Like, if my character's gonna die, I want I want to see them struggle, and I want to see them. I want to care about it. And if they're just smashed after doing everything perfectly, then I feel kind of cheated. The flip side, of course, is that if they only ever fail, then I'm also not really invested, because I'm like, well, there's no way they're going to beat a big boss because they didn't beat a small boss or a medium-sized boss. Like, there's just no sense of potential progression.
Or
And
like a
if
totally like disjointing moment where it's like suddenly they're OP,
yeah,
overpowered,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
they smash the boss. It's like, no, that doesn't make sense.
Plot
like
armor.
you
Yay.
lost all of these fights and learned from every single failure, but not soon enough to like win at all. Just enough
Exactly.
to win at and so that also doesn't really work for me. Um, and obviously, like just you know, if you beat the boss after beating everybody, so basically what I'm getting at, I think, is that um, any sense of progression that leads to a big boss that feels satisfactory, there has to be a kind of balance that includes success and failure that the character learns from. And I mean, and in that case, it just really seems like this is just how to write a solid book, not just based on the physical aspect of things, but just, telling a good yarn.
Yeah. And those successes and failures don't have to necessarily just be physical. You
Yeah,
can introduce it
yeah,
in different ways
exactly.
as
And
well.
and then when you take that to the final boss, like a little bit of every failure and a little bit of every success in that battle, and the like, I mean, also like my little tip, like especially if the battle is a physical one, but not only if it's a physical one, is don't rush through them. Let them take like multiple chapters, because like if you've got the space for it, like expanding that, taking that time allows you to have not just to incorporate the lessons learned from the rest of the book, but to have attempts, successes, and failures within the big battle, whether that's like a full-size field battle, whether it's just like mano a mano, like in one, like two folks just really duking it out, like having success and failure within that single fight is like that's why we read those 400 pages to get to this extra like 50 to 100 pages. We didn't
Yeah.
read it just so you could like, and then he won, smash, like.
If we learn anything from Dragon Ball, it's like let that stuff breathe. Multiple episodes.
Okay, maybe don't let it breathe quite that much.
No, Dragon Ball is an exaggeration. It's like, when the fuck is he gonna fight Majin Buu? They're just gonna charge up and scream at each other. Yeah, but I completely agree, and I think all of this has been amazing advice and food for thought for anyone out there thinking about fitness, physicality, bodies, and how all of this fits into character progression, character training, and whatnot. So Thank you so much, Cherae, for sharing all of your insight and showing off your arms. It's been an absolute blast.
Thank you guys.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Right at the end, just getting there with that like sexy NPR voice.
That's right.
Thank you, guys. All right. Well, Cherae, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me still at Twitter, which is at C_L_CLARK. And my website will always have the most up to date of the socials, which is CLClarkwrites.com. And I have accounts at like Twitter, as I said, Instagram, Blue Sky, even TikTok. Sometimes I show sword videos on TikTok. So, you know,
There you go.
that's
Nice.
your thing.
Yeah. If you want to see Cherae swinging swords and carrying sandbags. Good time. All right. Well, you can also follow SFF Addicts on Instagram, Twitter, all that jazz at SFF Addicts Pod. You can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. You can go pick up Mushroom Blues in all the formats if you want a fungal murder mystery to get you through these wintry months. Well, depending on where you are. But Greta, what about you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Greta K. Kelly. Website is gretakkelly.com if you want to sign up for the newsletter. And my books are in all the formats and all the places, the most recent one being The Queen of Days. It's basically what happens when a thief, a 12-year-old, and a demon walk into a temple, but you'll have to read the book to read the punchline.
You got this shit down. Bravo.
Thank
Bravo,
you.
my
Thank
friend.
you.
You got this. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. For now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.